How to listen to your inner voice. We have within us a system, a guiding mechanism, a conversation with our higher self that is occurring every single day. The question is, are we listening to this inner voice? Are we allowing the knowledge and wisdom from the inner voice to be received so that we can express it and, on the journey to creating the success that we want, find flow, joy, and bliss in the different things that we do each and every day? Are we also listening to the inner voice that presents itself as synchronicities in the outer world, that reveals itself in the outcome or the desired wish fulfilled as a result of honoring it? Can we reflect back to times in our life where we listened to our inner voice and it may have taken us off a pathway that was not a commonly traveled pathway, but at the same time, it brought forth the end result, and it did it so in the spirit of harmony, benefit for us, others, and divine and evolution? This inner voice is either silenced or further facilitated. When a person gets to a certain point in the journey, they begin to realize more and more so that the answers were always within them. And there's a bias that says that the answers are in the outer world, and people know better than you. Well, the truth is this: nobody really knows you except yourself. The only person that can really understand you is yourself. And this inner voice conversation is one with your higher self that is designed to facilitate a creating and expressing from your own unique way of expressing. And while we can pay attention to and value the opinions of others and the information in the outer world, it's also important to cultivate a deeper connection with the inner voice. If we don't develop a connection with the inner voice, we can feel overwhelmed by complexity. In the world that we live in today, where there is so much information available, easier, faster than ever before, it's easy for a person to become overwhelmed if they're not able to differentiate what is valuable and resonant to them and applicable to the definite chief aim, important and worth reflecting upon, rather than information that is not related. When a person believes they have to consume more information than they need, a lot of times they are not listening to their inner voice. The inner voice is one of simplicity, flow, harmony, and in alignment and contribution with bringing forth your definite chief aim. Your inner voice is on your side, so thus it's important to develop and encourage this connection. Perhaps many people around us do not value the inner voice to the degree that it could be valued, and thus the confusion of the outer world can result in confusion within, because many people have taught us to get the answers in the outer world. And if many are confused, then we assume that being confused is the normal state. The normal state is one of unconditional love and peace. You can say that's the highest form of existence here on this planet. And it is found by being on purpose and being on service. And this being on purpose is your contribution and your creative expression to share with others that is facilitated by this inner voice. As you bring forth your definite chief aim and create success in your life, you begin to remove the programming and the subconscious mind information that denied your connection with your inner voice. And as you continue to release this programming, you'll find that you'll have a higher degree of self-esteem, a greater degree of flow and a greater ability to embrace and rise above complexity. You are then sought after as a person that is a problem solver. You'll find yourself coming up with solutions easier, faster than ever before. You'll be connected with infinite intelligence, the intelligence that exists in all of us, that is received via the inner voice. And the way we facilitate it is by recognizing the inner voice and encouraging the different people, environment, circumstance, and information, sensory input that facilitates the inner voice. The first step is to commit to evolving your self-esteem. Now, these are the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. I recommend you watch this video that I did many years ago on this book. So let's discuss the perspective of connecting and encouraging and evolving the relationship with our inner voice, the guidance, the communication that is received by our higher self. The first step is to practice living consciously. Most of us, most of who we are, is subconscious. And we are in the process of making the darkness conscious, as Carl Jung put it, by revealing about ourselves upon reflection of what we see in the outer world. Our beliefs, our assumptions create our reality, and some of these beliefs and assumptions is based on past programming. So what we want to then do is reflect upon the effects in the outer world and track it back to the cause within. This is revealed to us by our emotional reaction. Once we set a definite chief aim, once we set a goal, we are on the journey of achieving the goal. In the process of achieving the goal, we become more encouraging of our inner voice. We listen to it more. And as a result, we're able to create success or bring forth our destination in ways that have never been brought forth before. There are many ways of creating success, many ways of creating and bringing forth a definite chief aim. There are infinite ways, and while we might assume that somebody else's way is the way, the truth is that's probably just only one way. And it is through our inner voice connection that we find our own unique way. This is first discovered by understanding that some of the beliefs and assumptions that we have about ourselves lowers our self-esteem, our self-confidence, and brings us into lower level states of disempowerment. Recommend watching the video I did just the last video ago on evolving and creating success from a place of understanding the levels of consciousness and the emotional guidance scale. Those tools are very valuable for helping us uncover what we react to so that we could evolve the program. And when I say react, I'm talking about reacting from lower levels of the emotional guidance scale. Again, watch that video. And when we react to those lower level emotions, what happens is we recreate our past. We project our past onto the present, and we affirm our past. So to live consciously is to recognize that we are doing this, and to find joy and flow, which is another important element of connecting with our inner voice, which we'll talk about in a moment, in evolving ourselves. The second important element is the practice of self-acceptance. It is to recognize again that perhaps some of the information that you've taken in causes you to not accept yourself, to see yourself as less than, to not realize your true greatness, which you discover in two fundamental ways. Upon reflection and affirmation of the greatness within you, thus changing the programming in your subconscious mind and evolving it to higher degrees of self-acceptance, or by creating success and discovering that it is possible for you, that you are able to do it. And as this process repeats again and again and again, and I recommend doing a combination of both, you begin to understand and accept yourself. And to the degree that you accept yourself is the degree that you will listen to and honor your inner voice and build a relationship with your higher self through your inner voice, and trust your inner voice. And you will see As you honor your inner voice, that you're able to create success and find solutions to problems and see opportunities where others only see obstacles. The next is the practice of self-responsibility. It is to take responsibility for everything that happens to you in your life. Perhaps in earlier stages of your journey, you didn't understand how to take responsibility. Perhaps you had encouraged or encountered certain kinds of information that disempowered you. Well, that was the past. Now you have the opportunity and the purpose of saying to yourself that from this day on, you are going to take responsibility for all the kind of information that you take in that is impressing your subconscious mind. And whatever is being expressed by the subconscious mind as it creates again and again and again, you take responsibility to reflect upon and evolve using one of my 4 subconscious mind modalities, or whatever modality works for you. And I'll put a link in the description to that discussion. The next is the practice of self-assertiveness. Self-assertiveness. So this is not force or controlling, but rather being assertive and saying this is the kind of life that you want to live. Choosing a definite chief aim and an ideal way that you want to live. Knowing that you are receiving that information from your higher self to live that way, and it is for you to live that way. And your assertiveness is to honor that and see it all the way till completion and make that the priority. The next is the practice of living purposefully. So as we discuss this, what we're really talking about here is purpose. Having a definite chief aim, knowing what you want in life, which, by the way, on the journey you'll develop higher degrees of clarity. So understand that maybe it's important to start with something small and use this as a guide to create success using this framework. And what you'll find is that you will uncover more aspects that will be received to you by your inner voice from your higher self that will develop higher degrees of purpose in your life, purposefulness. You will find higher degrees of purpose, and you will honor and live from a higher degree of purpose. The next is the principle of personal integrity. Okay, we call this spirit of harmony. Benefit for you, others, divine, and evolution, to continuously evolve to higher degrees of integrity. It is where your thoughts, emotions, actions are one. It is to live in integrity by choosing people, environment, circumstance, and information that is of the highest level of integrity. And as you become more aware of who you are by living consciously, you rise up the bar of integrity and continue to evolve. All of this will lead to higher levels of connection with your inner voice. Your inner voice is bringing you to higher levels of yourself, higher versions of your self-image called the higher self that will be internalized and impressed within you in your subconscious mind to be that way. So this is the journey. Evolving to higher degrees of self-esteem, committing to it, and then the second step, finding and living in your flow. So many of you know one of my favorite books is Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And the premise of the book is the realization that many of us experience and have experienced many times this concept called flow. It's where challenge and skill is experienced as one. There's a certain amount of challenge, and we embrace the challenge, and we rise up to the challenge, developing new skill. Now, this is also the process for evolving to higher degrees of self-esteem. And the way we evolve to higher degrees or higher levels of self-esteem is reflecting upon the previous video that I did, observing and understanding what shows up to you in the outer world to reveal about yourself based on your emotional reaction to it. And that's the meaning you're assigning to it. And if what shows up triggers within us certain kinds of emotions that make us feel disempowered, less than, lower our self-esteem, then we're not going to have a deeper connection, or we will limit our connection to our higher self via our inner voice. We won't have a higher degree of connection to our inner voice. So thus, we want to live in flow by recognizing that we want to place ourselves in situations, and one of the best ways to do this is by setting goals and choosing environments that challenge us. Now, this could be day-to-day life or a certain goal. And as the challenges occur, we rise up to higher levels of skill to overcome these challenges. Now, if something is too challenging, then we become overwhelmed by it. And my goal throughout these videos is to give you many tools to help you overcome the challenges that show up, because these were the challenges that showed up for me and continue to show up for me along this journey. And these are the exact tools that I use to overcome them and maintain my flow. So flow is where challenge meets skill. It's also where we have the greatest joy and bliss. There's a book called Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler, and he talks about in there that a neurotransmitter called anandamide is released when we are in flow. And this neurotransmitter binds to THC receptors in the brain, creating a sensation of bliss. And anandamide comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means bliss. So to be in flow, which is to rise up to higher degrees of challenge, and developing more skill, which is done through evolving your self-esteem, brings you a higher degree of bliss. And thus, living in flow and being in flow is very rewarding spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Now, computer programmers experience flow. Watch the video I did on flow. I'll put a link in the description. Athletes experience flow. Public speakers experience flow. Anytime you are doing something that you are engaged with and you enjoy both the process, the journey, and the destination, that's when you experience flow. So thus, we want to be aware and cognizant of when we experience flow and choose to be in flow. Why? Because what I found, and I've talked to many on this journey about this, is that their inner voice connection is facilitated when they're in flow. Now, reflect back on your own personal experience, and you will find that when you are in flow, you have a deeper connection with your inner voice. And what you'll experience is these elements. So let's run through the process. First, we always work with a goal, a definite chief aim. Now, this acts as a compass, because if we know where we're going, then we can experience contrast on the journey, either emotional reaction-based contrast or challenge-based contrast. And our goal is to achieve the goal and to also see the journey as blissful as the destination. This is done by facilitating flow through incremental increases in challenge along the journey. So thus, picking environments that are not overwhelming and stressful is very important if you want to create and live in flow. Now, if the goal here, and this is what the purpose of this video is to facilitate an inner voice connection, a deeper connection with your inner voice, and build a relationship with your higher self through your inner voice so you can receive hunches, insights, inspirations, and unique ways of creating success, then it's important to choose the environments that are in alignment with facilitating flow. Now, flow is experienced in part and in whole. So you can have an entire day where you feel mostly in flow, or you could be doing specific tasks or projects related to your definite chief aim in which you experience flow. Now, I recommend valuing both, making a commitment that you're going to choose to be in flow most of the day using this process. Number two is make a commitment that you are going to find flow in the various activities that you do every single day that is contributing to the realization of your definite chief aim, even if it's not directly contributing. Now, we're talking about definiteness of purpose here, linking all areas of your life to your definite chief aim, and your definite chief aim to all other areas of your life. Watch the video I did on definiteness of purpose and the definite chief aim. I'll put a link in the description. And by the way, I'm planning on releasing on my next video a very powerful video that I want to share with everybody because I've gotten a lot of requests for it. And that's a video on the definite chief aim, creating a definite chief aim. So I trust you're going to enjoy that. And this entire system, you could say, will make a higher degree of clarity, and it could be implemented pretty much verbatim or with modifications based on what your inner voice tells you. Now, part and in whole, tune into immediate reporting and feedback. Okay, this is where your inner voice starts to communicate with you. So let's say you pick a task, and your goal is to see the task all the way till completion and work on it for 60 minutes. You know what completion looks like, and your goal is to become submerged in the process of the task. Now, what you'll find is because you've set a clear goal and the challenge is really completing the task in 1 hour or working diligently on it for 1 hour, is that you'll find that you'll be more engaged in the process. And whatever shows up for you, you can write down as far as emotional reaction and use my previous video to help you overcome that along the journey. Now, we want to maintain a balance between the challenge and skill. If something is too challenging, we might not experience flow. If something is just challenging enough, we can rise up and develop the skill real time, and the skill is going to be given to you through hunches and inspirations via the inner voice. What are we doing here? We're using flow to facilitate the connection with our inner voice. Now, here are some important elements when it comes to tuning into immediate reporting and feedback along the journey. So we're experiencing challenge and skill, and we want to maintain flow so we get the inner voice communication. I pull these elements here from the book Power versus Force by David Hawkins. I recommend you watch that video. I'll put a link in the description. It's important to calibrate and understand that flow and the communication we call inner voice is from the higher self, and thus the higher self does not operate from the disempowering, fear-based negative programming that we may have learned from the past. So we have to be able to differentiate and tune into it. So here are some mind calibrators. Accepting versus rejecting. Our inner voice speaks of acceptingness. You feel the accepting energy, and you go about doing things from an accepting perspective rather than force and rejecting, pushing it away. Allowing it versus controlling. This means allowing the expression to flow from you, allow the creativity to be expressed from you in what you're doing, and trust that it's going to happen. Now, this might be challenging for some because we have not consciously been doing this. This is an important part of the journey. And most likely, as a result of that, we might be going into the realm of controlling, forcing ourselves, forcing other people. Now, that's how you break flow, and that's how you break the connection with your inner voice. Approving versus critical. Okay, there's a difference. Understanding what is happening and seeing it as objective, valuable data in contribution to your definite chief aim and part and whole, and also facilitating the connection with your inner voice, rather than being critical of what you see or how you experience yourself or your interactions with others. Nuance point. Authoritative versus dogmatic, balanced versus extreme, being confident versus arrogant, there's a fine line. And these sensations, you can sense them. After a period of time, you're going to be able to tune into this and observe if you are going into any extremity, if you're maintaining your balance or you're being extreme. Remember, nuance, the power is in the nuance, and that's right there, the connection with your inner voice. And there's higher degrees of connection with your inner voice. And the deeper the connection with your inner voice, the more profound and more pronounced this voice will be to you, and you will also have a healthy relationship built with it, and you will honor it. Confident versus arrogant, diplomatic versus deceptive. So if you're doing deceptive things as part of your definite chief aim, then you are breaking the connection with the higher self, and thus you're not going to receive that connection with your inner voice, and you're going to create success or whatever it is from a place of force, which has side effects. Flexible versus rigid, forgiving versus resenting, liberating versus restricting, optimistic versus pessimistic, orderly versus confused, and respectful versus demeaning. You can tune yourself and have a degree of sensitivity cultivated where you can observe if you are biasing to the extremity of the opposite end that is not going to be facilitating of your inner voice. The next is maintaining a balance between challenge and skill, as we discussed. We want the environments that are designed to facilitate flow. So you'll notice that when you're in these environments, you'll have a heightened sense of creativity. You'll notice that you get a lot more ideas, hunches, and inspirations. You'll experience a higher degree of joy and bliss and contribution as far as empowerment from your inner voice and a can-do spirit that is in alignment with creating what you desire. After a period of time, you're going to be able to identify these environments with vivid clarity. They're going to have certain kinds of characteristics. They'll be facilitated by certain kinds of information that is in the environment, certain kinds of experiences, perhaps certain people, circumstances that are in the environments. These environments are going to facilitate your flow. They're very much in harmony with the mastermind concept when you're working with other individuals. Watch the video I did with Power of the Mastermind or Power of Mastermind to understand and dimensionalize further the importance of surrounding yourself with individuals who are in alignment with bringing your inner voice to a higher degree of vividness and clarity within. Now, some challenging environments can develop you also, since the goal of flow is to understand that life may at times be experienced as very challenging, or there is different levels of challenge, and these challenging elements that show up in the outer world actually reveal to us about ourselves, and we can grow in these environments. So we don't want to run away from challenge if our inner voice tells us not to run away from it. Now, when do you stay in an environment that facilitates flow? And when do you leave an environment that breaks your flow? Or when do you stay in an environment that might be experienced as extremely challenging, that develops and grows you? And when do you leave it? See, that answer is found within, in your inner world, and it's individualized. Always remember that flow is facilitated in the sweet spot where challenge meets skill. Thus, you want to find and tune into this. This is part of the whole process of tuning into our inner voice, is finding out our home environment, the one that facilitates flow. If an environment is too challenging and can be experienced as overwhelming or frustrating, we will experience perhaps a downward spiral. So then an environment that facilitates boredom, pessimism, frustration, or overwhelmment, disappointment, doubt, worry will start to eventually, as we continue to remain in there, either cause us to identify with that level of the emotional guidance scale or bring us into a downward spiral. So we want to be aware of this, because what happens sometimes is when somebody identifies with a certain environment of disappointment or overwhelm or frustration, is they begin to consider that environment to be home. And then they forget what it was like to be in flow. Flow is something that we want to remember. When we were children, we experienced high degrees of flow. When we are in our most creative or doing something that we really enjoy and are engaged in, perhaps something with the Ikigai, doing what we love to do, what we are good at, what the world needs, and is perhaps a career, we find flow. And we enjoy the challenge and the cultivation of skills in the process of the challenge. And it stimulates us. And it brings us into higher levels of realization and inner world truth and understanding. Think about the concept of alchemy. An alchemist would sit there and try to turn lead into gold, and in the process discover the mysteries and the secrets of life. And this is a metaphorical idea that is very much applicable to your own project or whatever it is that you're doing. However, if it's too frustrating, then you don't experience the flow that will allow you to tap into your inner voice, where you will discover these inner guidance-based truths that are received from, you could say, divine or infinite intelligence, whatever is right for you, or creative intelligence, that teaches you, that grows you, that evolves you, and that you learn to trust and honor. So we want to make sure we maintain this. This is very important. If we don't maintain a certain degree of flow for an extended period of time on a daily basis, we'll have a hard time calibrating to and identifying which environments facilitate and honor our flow, which encourage our flow. We will forget. And most of our life is, in later stages, about remembering certain things that we learned when we were children. And that you have knowledge, wisdom, and expertise with you right now, and it is best facilitated and utilized and directed towards a specific worthwhile objective when you're in flow, in a childlike, playful state in which you are focused and engaged. Now, what you notice that when you maintain that, your actions and awareness will become one. You will become one with what you're doing. You will be in flow. And when somebody asks you, is this time to act or time to reflect, you will know the difference. You will consult with and know based on your inner voice. And you'll see it all as one. You won't separate it. Actions and awareness is one. So the question then becomes, do you do something or do you wait and allow the outer world to reflect something and do its own course, which is called Wu Wei, action through inaction? Well, the answer is it depends. And what depends is what your inner voice reveals to you while you're in flow. And again, remember, this is done in the task or in the project and at a macro level in life. If you maintain flow in life and you make flow a priority, as in live in your flow, then you'll notice that this is easy. It'll be automatic. Now, as a result of this, distractions will be automatically excluded from your consciousness. Now, I talked about this in one of the previous videos that I made, and I'll put a link in the description, called Unwavering Focus. And the idea is that rather than trying to get focus, you are focused by being who you are, which is in alignment with your definite chief aim and your higher self, and you want to be there. That would be your flow. In the process, you'll notice that you will listen to your inner voice that will guide you and direct you to what is harmonious in the outer world, people, environment, circumstance, and information. And you won't have a desire to consume information or be in environments or around people, environment, or circumstance that is misaligned. And you won't judge it and say that that environment is bad or less than, but rather it is not part of the definite chief aim, the journey that you are on and the purpose that you are living in which you find the joy. Now, as a result of being in this state, what you'll also notice is that fear tapers away. So we're talking about, as Napoleon Hill mentioned in Think and Grow Rich, the 6 basic fears. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love or someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. These are the categories of fear. And these elements can show up when a person is misaligned with their inner voice, with their higher self. So by maintaining flow and being in alignment with your inner voice, you are guided. And as a result, you don't need these fears, because the reason why these fears existed is because you lost your connection with your inner voice. And after facilitating the connection with the inner voice by, in recap, making your self-esteem and self-confidence a priority by practicing living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and your integrity, as well as finding and honoring your flow. As a result of being that way, you will maintain a higher degree of connection with your inner voice, and there's nowhere else you want to be. So thus these elements that are not in harmony with creating what you desire, which are fear-based, are elements that you're not going to consciously identify with to impress the subconscious mind and externalize. So what we impress in the subconscious mind externalizes. So it's not so much the fear, but the externalization of the fear as circumstance, people, environment, that occurs once we have it impressed on the subconscious mind long enough. Now, the inner voice, which is from your higher self, does not lead you down the pathway to encouraging any one of these fears, but rather these fears taper away. They release themselves. You don't even have to force yourself to look away from the fear. It's automatic because it is also part of the distraction that will be excluded out of your consciousness. And then self-consciousness disappears. Self-esteem and self-confidence increases. There's a oneness that occurs. You start to understand more and more so that we are all individual expressions of the same mind. So everybody's working together and remains in the spirit of harmony. This is the formula then for if you've created a mastermind and you have a team or a group of individuals that you are working towards a definite chief aim with, that you experience reality together from a place of harmony. And when that happens, each individual finds their flow, elevates their flow, lives in flow, evolves their self-esteem, and as a result, all of them have connections to their inner voice that contribute, because in one level, it's the same inner voice. And as a result of that, there's no need for egoic self-consciousness, which is based on fear, because fear has stepped out of the equation. Now, what you'll also notice is that time is distorted. A time distortion occurs. Now, when a person experiences a very deep connection with their inner voice, they will understand that they're able to create what they desire from a place of joy, bliss, and ease, and what we would call instant manifestation. This makes a lot more sense. So then the variable of time, that things take time or requires hard work or any other kinds of meaning, are transcended because what we're working with is a higher degree of connection with mind, body, spirit, and emotion. So the physical realm, emotional realm, mental realm, and the spiritual realm working in harmony as one. And as a result, some of the rules that we put in place conceptually are no longer relevant. Now, it is at this level when a person becomes what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls autotelic. So the activity and the person becomes one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to the levels of consciousness in David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force and Letting Go. This is where a person operates from a level of love and peace, calibrating at the energy level of 500 or 600. Now, when a person is operating at 500 or 600 level of energy, which can happen from time to time, but the goal is to remain in there, this person has a deep, profound, clear connection with their inner voice and is guided. And they attract and be in harmony with individuals who also have this inner voice connection. So let's look at what David Hawkins has to say about this. He says, eventually we become love. Everything we do and say, every movement we make is energized by the lovingness that we have owned within ourselves. Whether speaking to a large audience or petting the dog, the energy of love is felt to be pouring out. See, because you got everything from within, you're full within, all the answers are within, and your connection and your ability to create everything is found via the inner voice and the connection to the higher self. And so he says then, we want to share what we hold in the heart as an experiential knowingness. And we hold it in the heart for everyone and everything, that they could be feeling it too. There then comes a desire to facilitate the inner voice in others. And this is where real abundance starts to show up, and you don't make people dependent on you. You empower, enable, and encourage them to find their own inner voice, and it becomes part of who you are. And automatic. This is not something you think and consciously plan on doing, but rather an automatic expression of your own creative form of expression. Intuitive understanding progressively replaces thinkingness. So this is where we don't experience the getting stuck or being in our head as this begins to disappear. Okay, we express clearly, and you get better and better at this with practice, and practice really is maintaining the connection in your flow and honoring it and being in it, and also while in the journey continuously evolving your self-esteem. Again, living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and personal integrity. So intuitive understanding progressively replaces thinkingness and begins to disappear. Over time, thinkingness and its mental processes are replaced by spontaneous, intuitive knowingness. Okay, this is autotelic, spontaneous, intuitive knowingness. You know what to think, how to do something, when to do it, when not to do it, and that is a result of the connection that you have, an automatic connection with your inner voice to your higher self. The higher self contains the self-image that is going to be impressed in the subconscious mind to externalize accordingly. It also contains the definite chief aim, which is given to you as a mission to release programming that denies all this stuff, and most of the programming is in fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love with someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. As we release these elements, we remove the friction and the smoke screens that deny the possibility of this being so, and as a result, we build a great, deeper connection relationship with ourself. This is what we call authentic self-love, which is expressed accordingly. Then everything happens effortlessly by synchronicity. We'll start to see meaningful connections in our interactions with the outer world, five sensory data, and others. And then we experience a higher degree of peace. Watch the discussion that I did on Way of Peace by James Allen. I'll put a link in the description, which gets into this a little deeper. He says the hallmark of this level is desirelessness. You know, this is interesting because when you become one with your higher self and you continuously honor that, you'll notice instant manifestation. There's no longer a separation between the idea and the creation or the manifestation of it. More and more so, it increases. And so we experience something called desirelessness. So there's no gap in between. Now, in the early stages, we have a desire, and the desire is to create success or to get to a certain level. And that's good. Because then what happens is with that desire, we can move forward. If you get into the works of David Hawkins, you'll learn that he doesn't put down the other levels of consciousness. They were all part of the journey of evolution and were required. So desire at a certain level was important so that you can move forward with inertia and then in the process release aspects of yourself. Eventually you get to this point. Now, some might experience this in some areas of their life where they can instantly manifest and create what they desire. And some areas of their life, they might experience this as challenging. So they will notice that they have more of a desire towards the outcome. This is what we call having a bias or a attachment to an outcome. That's excessive desire. Now, we all know that when we become attached to the outcome, we're not working with these powers. We're working with the powers of force. And what we want is to work with the powers of mind. So he says, there is no need to want for anything because everything manifests in our life spontaneously and automatically. Without conscious will or effort, thoughts held in the mind at this level are very powerful and tend to manifest rapidly. The phenomena of synchronicity is continuous. The mechanisms of cause and effect and the inner working of the universe stand forth clearly revealed. As Carl Jung had once mentioned, that behind all chaos is a secret order. Things will start to make more sense to you. Things that were hidden and confused and a lot of times shrouded in mystery will start to be even more clear and make even more sense to you. It says the mechanisms of cause and effect and the inner working of the universe stand forth clearly revealed as we are now witnessing the very basis of reality itself. These very high states of awareness happen spontaneously and unexpectedly, and they tend to recur and stay for longer and longer durations. Once this has been experienced, our intention automatically becomes to make the state of peace permanent. Now, when a person makes the state of peace permanent, they then decide to automatically, because it's not a desire, and they maintain the self-esteem and move into higher degrees of flow and living in flow. Now, throughout that process, what happens is you develop a greater connection. So all of this is designed to facilitate and deepen the connection with the inner voice. Knowing, and we go back to the start of this video, that perhaps for many years we forgot that we had this inner voice connection. It was there. We had it when we were children. And then we went down the journey of learning about things in the outer world, which was good. It's important to learn things in the outer world. But there comes a point in the journey, at some point, where we have to learn to connect back to this inner voice so we can better work with the information that we learn from the outer world, as well as the information that we gather via the inner voice to create and contribute to the end result, bringing forth our definite chief aim and continuous evolution. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.